Welcome to Therapy in the Great Outdoors, a podcast about the business and practice of nature-based pediatric therapy of all kinds. If you are a nature-loving therapist who works with children, this podcast will help you start taking your work outdoors into nature and help you grow a profitable nature-based therapy practice or program that connects children to nature and changes their lives and yours forever. I'm your host, the ever honest, always 100% real, Laura Park Figueroa. I have been a pediatric occupational therapist for over 20 years. But 7 years ago, I almost left the field entirely. I was so burned out. And nature-based therapy is what saved me. It reignited my love of my work, and I saw profound changes in the children that I was working with. I'm the founder of Outdoor Kids OT and the creator of the Contigo approach, an evidence-based framework for nature-based pediatric therapy services. I've helped dozens of pediatric therapists start and grow successful nature-based practices through my business coaching and online programs. The latest of which is the Therapy in the Great Outdoors community, TIGO for short. TIGO is an online membership site with loads of resources to support you every step of the way as you start and grow your nature-based therapy work. You can find out more at therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com. Working outdoors with children can be a wild ride. Are you ready for the adventure? Let's jump in. Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 7 of Therapy in the Great Outdoors. This is going to be an interesting one. The topic today that I want to talk about is tenets of a nature-based lifestyle. I'll tell you how all of this came up, but first I want to remind you that I am no longer going to be doing a research article on every episode. So I am going to flip back and forth between a content episode, which will eventually be interviews with other nature-based practitioners, or me talking about something, as I will do today, about tenets of a nature-based lifestyle. And then in between those content episodes, I will do takeaways from the research, because what I was finding was that the 2-minute takeaways I was doing were really ending up being more like 10-minute takeaways. And I've gotten a lot of feedback from you, the listeners, that you enjoy those research takeaways. So I think it's easier to have those be their own individual episodes. So we will do 10-minute takeaways from the research on specific episodes, which might actually go a little longer than 10 minutes. And then every other episode will be a content episode. So I hope that makes sense. And I think it will be really, really great for the format for the Therapy in the Great Outdoors podcast going forward. So tenets of a nature-based lifestyle. What do I mean by tenets? So tenets are ideologies or beliefs or principles. Those are other words for what I mean by a tenet. And these are things that I have noticed from working with other nature-based pediatric therapists for several years now. I do want to give a caveat before I share these, that these are my very early thoughts on this. I'm definitely sharing these early on in my thought process because I want to hear what you think. I want feedback from those of you in the Therapy in the Great Outdoors, the TIGO, I'm calling it for short because Therapy in the Great Outdoors is a mouthful. From the TIGO community, I want to know what you think about these. My brain is just my brain. This is based on what I've talked to other people about, but I also want to hear what you think and to hear if I left anything out or if there are specific tenets that I talk about that resonate very deeply with you, or if there's others that don't resonate as much. So please weigh in on this topic. Comment on Instagram. I always post a post about the podcast episode of the week. And then also you can comment in the TIGO community online, which if you're not a member, come join us. therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com. We have loads of free spaces and free content for you there, including a podcast discussion for every episode of the TIGO podcast. I should also state before I start sharing about these that part of the reason I am sharing this with you in the TIGO community is that I think in any community, if you can call people into a bigger picture vision of what their lives could be like, or a bigger picture vision of the values that everyone in that community holds, then you have a stronger community, right? Everyone in the community then knows what you're about or what the values are or what you stand for or what your ideologies are in that community. So this is my, again, very early thoughts, very first attempt. This is probably going to change and grow over time and become something similar, but maybe very different as I work out my thoughts on this and as I get feedback from you in the Tigo community. So there are 7 tenets that I have developed from my conversations and relationships with people in this space. And I framed all of these tenets in terms of a verb, because these words are words that are things that we can do or things that we value doing or being as nature-based therapists. So tenets of a nature-based lifestyle. All right, I'm going to dive in. The first tenet is connect. And when I say connect, I mean that we as nature-based therapists value connection with nature. Nature meaning all of nature, plants, animals, and land, and very importantly, other people. People in our families, our friendships, people in our communities, and the clients that we serve in our nature-based practices. So connecting is huge. We love spending time in nature. We love spending time developing those relationships with others. And we value that all of life really exists in those relationships, that is what makes our lives really meaningful, is to connect with the whole of nature, the outdoors, and other people. This word connect also to me involves an open-mindedness to learning from others and learning from nature. And I will talk more on that later in another one of the tenets. So there's one that talks about learning in and of itself. So, all right, I'll move on. That first one is connect. Now, I've kind of grouped these together a little bit in pairs because it just made sense to me. So connect is the first one, protect is the second one. So the first two are connect and protect. Protecting meaning protect the earth. And this involves so much in life, right? So if we are concerned about environmentalism as nature-based pediatric therapists, that means we think about protecting the earth in all of the choices we make in our lives. What we buy, how we invest our time and resources, our daily life practices, things like composting, recycling, reducing our waste, reusing items rather than buying new, maybe buying used items rather than new items, things like that. Another thing that I feel really strongly about lately, I don't know, I've shared some of this on Instagram a bit, but I have really changed my diet recently. And I think we need to think about protecting the earth in what we are eating. Now, I'm warning you, I'm a little nervous to share this because I'm warning you that I don't want to make anyone angry with this podcast. But I do want to share, honestly, what I've been learning, which has been very shocking to me, specifically about how we protect the earth with what we eat. And I would highly recommend you to check out a book called Sacred Cow, The Case for Better Meat, and the documentary by the same name, Sacred Cow, because this book and some of the other things that I have been reading and people I have been following on Instagram, like Carnivore MD and Sustainable Dish, both of those are Instagram people who talk about diet. This book and some of the other reading I've been doing and the podcast and research that I've been looking at around diet have actually blown my mind that a vegetarian diet is not the best way to protect the earth. So that's all I'm going to say. I could do a whole episode on diet, honestly, with everything I've been learning. My mind has been blown, but I would greatly encourage you to read those resources and to be open-minded, as I just talked about, in having some of your previous ideas challenged and changing your behavior based on new evidence that you have. And that is something I'm going to talk about in a little bit in one of the other tenets, is being open to having your ideas challenged and changing your opinion. So I can strongly state here that my opinion is that veganism for sure is not a healthy diet to have. You have to supplement so much to really get what your body needs. There's loads of research, specifically about children being very damaged by a vegan diet developmentally, as well as vegetarianism are not necessarily the best ways to protect the earth with your diet. So I say that because I feel so strongly about it now, and my brain has just been like, like my mind blown about how I've really shifted my thinking based on some of the research that I've been reading lately. So I'll leave it there and moving on. Now, I'm not saying, hold on, I do need to clarify. I'm not saying that you have to eat meat to be a nature-based pediatric therapist and believe in the tenet of protecting the earth. I'm not saying that at all. I'm sharing a very specific example from my life about how I am trying to protect the earth by changing my behaviors based on research and evidence that I have about how what I eat can really benefit the environment. So that being said, I can't even go into it all now because the Sacred Cow book goes into every single thing that I'm sure all of you are thinking, because I know that like 90% of you are probably like thinking, Laura's crazy saying this right now. But I do just encourage you to look at those resources and see how your thinking might change. So the first two were connect and protect. The third tenet is honor. And I chose this word specifically because I noticed this in nature-based therapists, that they have a sense in which they honor many things, but specifically honoring the past, honoring the complexity, the diversity of all of life on Earth, honoring things like indigenous cultures, honoring that there are histories of racism or exclusion in regards to the nature-based work that we do, but also in all of life, like how those things influence how we live today. And also honoring that there are many ways of being and doing life and being and doing a nature-based therapist or doing nature-based therapy. There's an interconnectedness to all of life. And I think that I notice particularly that nature-based therapists have a way of honoring that there is this interconnectedness of everything that we do in life, and honoring all of those things that happened in the past and how they influence our lives and our work today. All right, we have connect, protect, honor. The fourth tenet is notice. When I say notice, I mean that we as nature-based therapists notice things. We notice things when we're out in nature. We notice small and big changes, like we notice the changing colors of the leaves, which might be a small, more nuanced change in the environment. But then we might also notice, obviously, the big things, like a tree falling in the path. But we notice not only things in nature like that, but we also notice changes or elements in our own selves, as well as the qualities or changes that are happening in other people. We notice shapes, patterns, colors, words, behaviors. We know how to listen. We know how to go slow, or we aim to go slow, maybe, even if we have a hard time doing that as people. I think that is something that nature-based therapists value, is a slowing down, an ability to be present, to be all there, whatever you're doing, to be present in that thing that you're doing at the given moment in time. And so to notice that. Another word for this might be mindfulness. This is something that I think a lot of nature-based therapists really subscribe to, the benefits of mindfulness, of being mindful about whatever you're doing, making intentional decisions, and just noticing. So that's the fourth one, notice. Connect, protect, honor, notice, move. Move is the fifth tenet of nature-based therapy or nature-based lifestyles. Moving our bodies is just one of the most important things that we could possibly do, right? And I think in general, nature-based therapists value movement. We have a value of not being sedentary. We are made to move as humans. We know this as therapists, right? If you're not moving in the most complex ways available to your individual body, then you're digressing, or you're dying, really. I mean, once we stop moving, we're dying. And so our bodies really need to move to be healthy. You probably are capable of way more movement than you actually think. I think a lot of times, at least for me, I'm just not a natural athlete. I have talked about this before publicly, that I really struggle to motivate myself to exercise, to be, I'm active, I enjoy moving my body, but I struggle to motivate myself to truly exercise and discipline myself to do harder work than just like taking a walk, really. So I want to encourage you that you are probably capable of more than you think in the movement arena. But I would highly recommend checking out the work of a couple of different people under this topic of movement. So if you do not know of her, which I'd be shocked if you're listening to this and you don't know of her, but in the small chance that you may not, if you've not heard of Katie Bowman, then please check out her website at nutritiousmovement.com. She is a biomechanist, really. She's just an expert on all things movement, and she's written loads of books, probably 8 or 10 books about movement and how important it is for our health and well-being. She also teaches movement classes. She has a studio where she teaches online as well as in person in Washington State. But she's just incredible. She's such a wonderful scholar and has so much valuable information that she shares in her books and in her online resources in order to help people think about how to get nutritious movement. Like the same way that our bodies need nutrients in our food, we need nutritious movement, meaning we need to move in a variety of different ways, right? Her website's just amazing, nutritiousmovement.com. And then along those lines, another thing that I have noticed that has really helped me, as well as has come up in some of my conversations with other people who are in the nature-based space, is the idea of minimalist shoes. So along those lines of nutritious movement, like making sure that our feet are healthy, they're the foundation of our body, right? There's this whole movement towards minimalist shoes so that you can feel the earth, your body can feel what it needs to do to balance you, to move correctly. And so you can find some information about that on Katie Bowman's website. She has a whole book actually about it. I believe it's called The Thinking Woman's Guide to Foot Pain or something like that. You can find it on her website. She has a whole book about feet and minimalist footwear, how to transition, why we should, et cetera, et cetera. So she's just a really great resource. And then the other website I would suggest for thinking about moving towards a more minimalist footwear experience is Anya's Reviews. So it's ANYAS reviews.com. So she is someone who embraced minimalist footwear and has solved a ton of her own alignment and foot problems by making this transition. And so she reviews minimalist shoes on her website. It's a treasure trove of information if you are into minimalist footwear. So those are just two that I would recommend for you to check out to think about the ways that we move. And I will say that I'm talking right now, maybe I should have said this at the beginning. I'm talking right now about things that we do as nature-based therapists in our own lifestyles. But I do think that these tenets are things that I've noticed people who do nature-based work are integrating into their work with children as well as into their work even with adults, if you are someone who works with adults too. And so this idea of movement applies to all of us, right? We need movement as therapists to be healthy and to give our best to our clients, and our clients need movement so desperately. I mean, our children today, they need movement more than ever because they're just so sedentary a lot of times in the screen time and video games and all of the things that we as therapists are concerned about in modern childhoods. So, all right, connect, protect, honor, notice, move. We're down to the last two. And the next one is grow. So you have probably heard me talk about growth mindset and the idea that we are not fixed as human beings. So this cycles back to some of the information I was talking about diet, like just my mind being blown and me having to be open to really take in new information and change my practices based on what I was learning and to see how I feel, which I feel great, by the way, how I'm eating now, much more energy and not as much brain fog as I used to have. But I really just this idea of grow, one, it's a nature-y word, right? But I've noticed that nature-based therapists are very open to this idea of new ideas, of being open to change, of being curious, to commit to their personal growth, to reflect on their practice and the things that they are doing, to be honest about our own shortcomings and our own strengths, even to own our strengths, right? So This ultimately is the idea of being able to embrace the mess of all of human life, essentially, but the mess of imperfection. We're not going to be perfect, but to be honest and be open to growth, really embracing that we are not fixed as human beings, that we can always grow, and being willing to do that hard work, to take a hard look at ourselves and make changes so that we can personally grow. So we're not stagnant. We're always growing as people who embrace a nature-based lifestyle and do this work of nature-based therapy. And the last one, all right, let me go through them again. Connect and protect. Those two go together because they rhyme. Honor and notice. Those two go together because I feel like you have to notice things in order to honor the past. And it's kind of this continual process of noticing and honoring. Honor and notice. Move and grow. Those two go together because as we're moving, we're growing and changing. And the last one sits by itself, and that is simplify. I've noticed that we as people who love nature, as people who live a nature-based lifestyle, we long to simplify our lives and our businesses. So we value this balance of work and play and rest in a way that a lot of people in the typical entrepreneurship space don't really. And again, even if you're not an entrepreneur listening to this podcast, many people, at least in the not official research that I've done, just in polls I've done of the people in my community and in my business coaching with therapists, like the therapists that are interested in nature-based practice, many of them are interested in entrepreneurship as well. It kind of makes sense. We're people who are interested in growing and thinking outside the box. And so the challenge is that a lot of times in the entrepreneurship space, there is a tendency to focus on like kind of growth at all costs, right? Like bottom line, the KPIs, the key performance indicators that say whether the metrics that say whether your business is doing well, right? But what I've noticed in nature-based therapists is that many of us value success in a different way than the typical entrepreneur, even the typical therapy entrepreneur might. We value this holistic view of what success looks like, right? This simpler view. And I don't know, this one's not as fleshed out in my mind yet, but I've just noticed that nature-based therapists value simplicity. We want to live simply. We want to enjoy our lives, and we want to run businesses or programs that are sustainable, meaning like, yes, they protect the earth. That's one of the tenets, right, that I've talked about. But when I say sustainable, I mean sustainable over the long haul for you as the program director or as the business owner, as well as financially as well. And the simplest business models actually are often the most successful. So simplify is the last tenet. Connect and protect, honor and notice, move and grow, and simplify. Those are the 7 tenets that I have come up with from my conversations with nature-based pediatric therapists for the last several years that I've been doing this work. And I would love, love, love to hear your thoughts on these, on what you think maybe I left out, because maybe I didn't capture everything, right? I don't think that I probably did capture everything. But again, it's just an initial sharing with y'all because I want to have conversation about this and kind of see if this resonates and if this feels like a description of what you've experienced in the nature-based community of people that you've connected with in your work or in your practice or in your life. So that's it for today. I will come out with another episode next week, which will be a takeaway from the research, and I will talk to you then. Bye. Thank you so much for spending time with me today, exploring therapy in the great outdoors. If you liked what you heard in this episode, please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes so we can share the magic of nature-based therapy with a wider audience of therapists who work with children who desperately need connection to nature nowadays, just like we do. If you're ready to take the next step in this adventure, join our free Therapy in the Great Outdoors community at therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com. The Tego community is a private space just for nature-based pediatric practitioners. We have loads of resources there to support you as you start or grow a nature-based practice or program. Our free Tego community has a discussion forum, a jobs and volunteers board, a crowdsourced treatment activities section, as well as free video trainings, research article reviews, and book recommendations from yours truly. Head on over to therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com to join today. So until next time, get outside, connect, reflect, and enjoy the business and practice of therapy in the great outdoors.